He looked me in the eyes with that cold kind of disgust and said, "You're useless. You'll never be anyone without me. My name is Laura, and today I'm going to tell you how I was humiliated inside my own home, and how I proved him wrong in a way he'll never forget. So grab your coffee and come with me. You're good for nothing, just taking up space." He didn't say it in the heat of an argument. He wasn't angry. He said it calmly, between a sip of coffee and straightening his tie. I was in the kitchen doing dishes, and he didn't even look at me. At first, I thought I misheard him, but he repeated it, like it was a fact, not an insult, like it made perfect sense. I wanted to respond, to scream, to smash the plate in my hand, but I just stood there, hands shaking, water slipping through my fingers. That night, we slept in the same bed, but in different worlds. He rolled over and fell asleep like nothing had happened. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, hearing those words bounce around the walls like echoes. Useless. Lazy. Was I, though? I started second-guessing myself, replaying everything I did. The clean house, the cooked dinner, the folded laundry. But none of it mattered. Not to him. To him, nothing I did counted. Nothing ever did. I woke up to sunlight cutting across my face, and a weight in my chest that felt heavier than my own body. I made coffee like always, served him like always. He left like always, absent kiss on the cheek, bag over his shoulder, a robotic bye. And I just stood there in the kitchen, frozen. The silence in that house was deafening. And for the first time I asked myself, how long have I been surviving like this? How long have I allowed myself to disappear? I walked through the house like it belonged to someone else. Nothing had my touch. Nothing said, "This is mine." The decor, the furniture, his choices. Even the throw blanket on the couch was his pick. Little by little, I gave in. A choice here, a surrender there. Until I vanished. I caught my reflection in the living room mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked tired, faded, hollow. And it broke me to realize I had let this happen. I had put myself here. I started remembering who I was before him. Before us. I had dreams, plans, a list of places to go, things to learn. I used to talk passionately about books, art, food. Now my voice had gone quiet, buried with my interests. When did I stop existing as a person? I stopped living, just to keep the marriage alive. A marriage he never even valued. I sat on the floor and cried, harder than I had in years. It came from a place so deep, I had forgotten it was even there. That same afternoon, he called me. "Pick up more coffee." "We're out." "No, how are you?" "No, thank you." Just a demand dressed as a reminder. I took a deep breath, and for the first time I didn't answer. Not out of pride, but exhaustion. I turned off the phone and walked out to the balcony. The sky was heavy, the clouds gray, and a cold wind brushed against my face. Oddly, I felt alive. For the first time in ages, the silence didn't suffocate me. It woke me up. That night, I didn't make dinner, didn't fix the bed. I sat on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, reading a book I once loved. When he got home and saw the house untouched, he asked, "You didn't do anything today?" I looked at him and almost smiled, because yes, I had done something. I had taken my first step out of an invisible prison. But he didn't know that yet. He didn't understand. And honestly, neither did I. Not fully. Not yet. But right there, with his words still burning in my memory, a tiny flame started to flicker inside me. Small, quiet, but steady. And I realized he wasn't just cruel. He was wrong. Dead wrong. Because I wasn't useless. And I sure as hell wasn't lazy. I was someone who had forgotten her own worth. But now, I was starting to remember. And when a woman remembers who she is, the whole world begins to shift. The next morning, I woke up different. Not better, not worse, just awake. It felt like I had been numb for years. And suddenly, my body was starting to feel everything at once. Every step through the house reminded me of the version of myself I had let slip away. A sink full of dishes, a messy couch, an unmade bed. Those things used to trigger panic. Now, they were just proof that I no longer needed to pretend. I was never a perfect housewife. And suddenly, I realized maybe that never even mattered. He noticed something was off. He watched me like my quietness was a threat. "You okay?" he asked while buttoning his shirt for work. I just nodded. The truth, I didn't know if I was okay. But I wasn't about to fake being broken just to earn pity. I didn't want pity. I wanted respect. And that's something he never gave me. Not even when I was sick or crying silently next to him, begging for affection without saying a word. That morning, I pulled out an old notebook, wrote down loose thoughts, messy memories that came flooding back. I remembered when I dreamed of becoming a designer. I had plans to study, to start something of my own. But he used to laugh at my ideas. "That doesn't make money. You dream too big. Stick to what you know." And over time, I started to believe him. I folded those dreams up and shoved them into a drawer, along with my art supplies. That drawer he never touched. That I stopped opening until now. I stood up, walked over to the cabinet in the living room, and pulled the drawer open. Everything was still there. The pens, the sketches, the drawing pad. Covered in dust, but alive underneath. When my fingers touched the paper, something stirred. It felt like meeting a version of myself I had forgotten. I sat right there on the floor and started to draw. The lines were shaky at first, my hands unsure, but the movement felt familiar, almost like a prayer, a mix of desperation and something sacred. I didn't know where it would lead, but for now it was enough. When he came home and saw everything spread across the floor, he scoffed. "Spent the whole day playing artist?" His laugh was short, dry. I didn't answer. I didn't need to prove anything to him anymore. I just kept drawing. And for the first time, I realized silence could be stronger than shouting. He stormed off annoyed, but I stayed right there, surrounded by colors, lines, and my tiny personal revolution. A woman sitting on the floor, sketching her own rebirth. I started building a routine. Nothing dramatic. Just a little time for myself every day. Writing, drawing, walking, sipping coffee while watching the world. Simple things, but ones that used to feel forbidden. Because I'd been taught that taking care of myself was selfish. That my worth came from how much I could serve others. Now, I was learning how to serve myself too. To look at myself with kindness. And the more I did that, the more I realized how badly I had abandoned myself, trying to become the ideal woman. On one of those walks, I spotted a flyer taped to a pole. Free online course, digital design. Starting now. My heart skipped. I took the flyer and walked home holding it like it was something fragile. Laid in bed, staring at it. Fear shouted, "You're not good enough." But a new voice, small, shaky, but brave, whispered, "What if you tried?" I fought those voices all night, until finally, at 3 a.m. I hit submit. Terrified, but I did it. He never knew. At least, not then. I kept the house in order, the dinners made, the same good morning routine. But inside, I was rebuilding. Every class was a hammer to the walls of fear. I hid behind headphones and excuses, but what I was learning was becoming a treasure, something that was mine. And knowing he could never take that from me, that gave me strength. He could keep calling me useless, but now I knew I was anything but. And this was only the beginning. It started with subtle questions. "You're acting different. Why are you going out more than usual? Are you hiding something?" The truth was, he couldn't stand not knowing. And even worse than that, he couldn't stand not being in control. But I stayed calm. No long explanations. Just a quiet smile, a deep breath, and I kept going. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just rediscovering myself. And maybe that irritated him more than if I had actually done something. Because for the first time, he was standing outside of my life. And that made him nervous. One evening, he walked in and found me watching an online class. Notebook full of notes by my side. He stopped in the doorway and stared. "Since when are you into this kind of stuff?" His tone was a mix of mockery and confusion. I paused the video, looked at him, and said, "Since I remembered I have a brain." It was the first time I ever spoke like that to him. Even I was surprised at how steady my voice sounded. He let out a bitter laugh, turned his back, and mumbled something like, "Another one of your phases." But I knew this wasn't a phase. There was no going back now. In the course, I was just another student. But in that space, I felt alive. I started submitting small assignments. People in the class began saying, "Whoever did this is talent." And I shrank a little inside, because I wasn't used to hearing compliments anymore. Soon, I started picking up freelance jobs. Small ones, low-paying, but they were mine. I created a simple portfolio and published it online. And one afternoon, I got my first payment, about $20 for a digital illustration. It wasn't much, but to me, it felt like winning the lottery. Because that money didn't come from him, or from anyone who ever doubted me. It came from my effort, my courage. I tucked that money into a little wooden box, along with the course flyer and my first redrawn sketch. My tiny altar of resistance. Every day after he left, I'd light a candle, make myself some coffee, put on my headphones, and disappear into my world. A world where my opinion mattered, where my creativity had a voice, where I mattered. And for the first time, the silence in that house wasn't painful. It was my freedom in a whisper. But too much freedom tends to draw attention, especially from those who feed on control. And he started trying to reel me back in. He bought me an expensive gift, said he wanted to fix us. But that gold-wrapped box with a new perfume didn't mean a thing anymore. Because I didn't want scraps. I didn't want to patch holes with shiny distractions. I wanted partnership. I wanted recognition, dignity. And none of that comes in a shopping bag. He couldn't understand. Because he never had to rebuild himself from the ground up. The tension started to rise. He'd come home later, talk less, watch more. Started asking who I was texting, what I was typing so much. And one night, he crossed a line. He barged into my space, opened my notebook, grabbed my phone. "You're hiding something." I took the phone from his hand, slowly, calmly, and said, "Yes, I've been hiding who I am for years. But not anymore." He just stood there, frozen, like he didn't recognize me. And maybe he didn't, because the woman he loved was submissive. This one, she was new. That night, he slept on the couch, and I felt lighter in our bed, like the space finally belonged to me. The room, my body, my future, everything was slowly coming back into my hands, even if still in pieces, even if I was still scared. Later that night, I got an email. "We love your portfolio. Can we discuss a long-term project?" My heart raced. I read it 5 times before believing it was real. Took a deep breath and typed, "Yes, I'm available." It was official. What once felt like an escape was becoming a destination. A new path was opening. I didn't tell him, not because I was afraid, but because I chose not to. Not everything needs to be shared with someone who never supported you. Some victories you protect in silence until they grow roots. So I kept quiet, but inside I was screaming. With relief, with gratitude, with rebirth. Because when a woman starts to bloom, the ones who only knew how to clip her wings start to panic. He wasn't even trying to hide his discomfort anymore. The silence that once felt like a shield now felt like a weapon. Doors slammed harder. Plates hit the table with force. His eyes didn't need words. They screamed. And me, I didn't flinch. I didn't answer. Because after all that time begging for attention, I realized that attention wasn't what I needed. I needed respect. And respect isn't something you ask for. It's something you demand. One morning, over coffee, he put down his cup and said, "If you want to go around pretending to be an artist, fine. Just don't expect me to fund your little hobby." I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I'm not expecting anything from you anymore." And I meant every word. The truth is, he was right about one thing. I had changed. And for someone used to seeing me small, that change was terrifying. He didn't want a wife. He wanted a shadow. Someone who smiled when he smiled, stayed quiet when he barked. But that woman he once knew, she was fading fast. making room for someone new, someone who looked in the mirror with steadier eyes, someone who didn't swallow everything for the sake of peace, someone who finally understood peace without truth is just another prison. That Saturday, he followed me. I was on my way to meet the client who'd offered me that long-term project. I could sense something strange in the air, but I ignored it. And there he was, standing across the street, watching me through the cafe window like a stranger. When I came home, he was waiting at the gate. "So now you're lying to me," he snapped. I gave a small, sad smile. "You never cared what I wanted, and now that I'm chasing it, you call it betrayal." He didn't answer, because deep down he knew I was right. The fight was ugly. We yelled, and for the first time I yelled back, not because I lost control, but because I needed to hear my own voice again. I threw every buried word at him. Every night I cried alone. Every dream I'd swallowed just to keep the peace. And he heard it all. He tried to flip the script, called me ungrateful, unstable. But none of it landed, because once you rebuild yourself, guilt stops working like a leash. I wasn't his trained dog anymore. I was a woman waking up. In the days that followed, he flip-flopped between ignoring me and trying to charm me. Flowers on the table, forced compliments, empty promises, but I saw through it all, because people who spend years tearing you down don't change overnight. And even if they did, I didn't want it anymore. The hardest truth I ever learned: not everyone who hurts you regrets it, and you don't need to wait for an apology to walk away. Sometimes forgiveness means leaving, and forgiving yourself for staying too long. So I started planning my exit. Quietly, carefully. I opened a separate bank account, rented a small studio apartment in another part of town, asked a college friend for help, packed little by little, hiding boxes as donations, as errands, as cleaning days. Every step felt like a silent scream for freedom. And with each one, something inside me began to breathe again. I wasn't running away. I was being born again. The night I told him, it was raining, almost like the sky itself was shedding all the pain I had carried. He was watching TV. I walked over, sat beside him, and said, "I'm leaving." He laughed, thought I was bluffing, until he saw the key on the table, the contract for the new job, the address to my new place. "You're serious?" he asked, his voice finally cracking. I nodded, not out of anger, out of clarity. His pain didn't empower me. My freedom did. He tried to talk me out of it, brought up memories, made promises, pulled the emotional strings. But I was somewhere else entirely. A place where I no longer owed explanations. A place where my pain had already served its sentence. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked to the door. I turned around just once, not to say goodbye to him, but to the version of me I used to be in that house. And in the silence between us, I left behind everything that once held me back. Except myself. The first day in the studio was quiet. No heavy footsteps in the hallway. No raised voices. No loaded questions. Just me and the sounds of the world outside. Honking cars, rain tapping the rooftop, voices drifting past the window. The ceiling was low, the walls were chipped, and the mattress was still on the floor. But in that raw simplicity, I felt richer than ever. There was no luxury, just freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged somewhere, even if I didn't know what came next. The fear was real. Every morning, it showed up like an unwanted guest. Sat on the edge of my bed and whispered, "What if everything goes wrong?" I'd take a deep breath and answer, "Then I'll start over." Because now I knew I could. I could start again. I could fail. And I could get back up. Every step I took outside that house reminded me, I didn't just survive. I chose to leave. I chose me. The woman who had been silenced for so long was finally being heard. I set up my workspace by the window. A simple desk, an old laptop, a coffee mug with quotes I'd scribbled myself. Those first few days were hard. Demanding clients, tight deadlines, silly mistakes. I cried alone some nights, but I never regretted it, because every tear now had purpose. They weren't from shame anymore. They were from growth. And growing hurts, but it also heals. I started writing little notes to myself on sticky tabs, plastering the wall with reminders. You're not useless. You're doing great. Keep going. Slowly, a routine took shape. I woke up early, made coffee with soft music playing in the background, worked until noon, then took walks around the neighborhood. I found a tiny bookstore nearby, run by an older woman who always offered tea. We became friends. She called me the girl with restless hands, and I laughed because she had no idea how much those hands were finally building something mine. I started living again, walking with my head held high, still insecure sometimes, still fragile, but stronger. With each step, I felt a little more whole. One afternoon, I got a message. It was from him. So you're really gonna throw it all away? I deleted it without replying. He didn't get it. Nothing was thrown away. I just stopped wasting myself. More messages followed. Some cold, some filled with guilt, others burning with anger. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I didn't bow to late apologies. Not all I'm sorry's come with change. And I didn't want words anymore. I wanted peace. And peace. I was building it, day by day. With time, my bank account started to grow. Projects multiplied. So did the praise. One client referred me to another. And before I knew it, I was part of a major campaign. But it didn't happen overnight. It took months of mistakes, attempts, sleepless nights, tough clients, and constant self-doubt. I earned more in 1 month than he ever said I'd make in a lifetime. But the money, while nice, wasn't the real win. The real victory was waking up without fear, looking in the mirror and finally recognizing myself, knowing that now I belong to me, not to someone else, not to a title, to me. One day, I ran into an old friend. She teared up as soon as she saw me. "You look different," she said. "You're glowing." And I smiled, because it was true. It wasn't makeup or new clothes. It was the glow of someone who survived being erased and watered herself back to life, day by day. Now she was blooming, not because of someone, but in spite of everything. And that's the most powerful kind of growth. The kind that blooms through concrete. I still get scared. I still cry. I still mess up. But now, all of that is just part of the process, not a sentence. And every night when I lie in bed, I say thank you for my cramped mattress, for my low ceiling, for the freedom that fits beneath it, because there's no space too small, for a soul that's decided to grow. And me, I haven't stopped growing since the day I walked away. Months had passed since I left that house, long enough to let even the deepest wounds begin to heal. Then one day I got an email. Launch event. Women Who Transform Creative Project. My name was listed among the featured artists. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I read it 3 times. But it wasn't. The campaign I helped create had gained recognition. And my name, small but real, was right there. Like a whisper in the middle of noise. Like a seed that somehow bloomed, despite everything stacked against it. I leaned back in my chair, took a deep breath, and let the tears come. Because this time, I was finally being seen by people who truly saw. The night of the event, I put on my favorite dress. Nothing flashy, just something that made me feel whole. I added lipstick, soft but sure. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I was still getting to know. Not the woman who begged for space, but the one who made space and owned it. I walked into the venue with steady steps. Yes, my heart was racing, but it was full of courage. Every light, every voice, every toast around me seemed to celebrate this new version of myself, a version that had bled but bloomed. Midway through the event, I heard someone call my name. I turned slowly, and there he was, the man who once called me useless, now standing in a suit, with eyes that looked hollow, like he was seeing a ghost from the past, and didn't know how to react. He walked up, hands awkward, unsure. "You look beautiful," he said, as if that made up for anything. I just smiled, not with bitterness, but with compassion, because he never really saw me. Only now, when others were starting to see. He finally tried to look. I saw your name in the campaign, he added. I didn't know you were that talented. That cut deep, but not the way it used to, because I didn't need his validation anymore. It was just strange, hearing out loud what I had always known in my heart, that I was capable, that I did have talent, that I was never lazy. I was just trapped. And even then, I still grew wings. He tried to keep talking, invited me out for coffee, said we should catch up, like old times. But I didn't want that, because I don't live in memories anymore. I live in presence, and he was never truly present. On the way home, the cab passed the street where we used to live. I asked the driver to slow down. I looked out the window. Same building, same curtains, but everything looked smaller now, shrunken, like even the place had been unmasked. That was where I had been made small for years. But I didn't feel angry or sad, just a quiet kind of peace, the kind you feel when you glance at a scar and feel grateful it finally closed, because some wounds need to be seen from the outside before you understand how much you've grown inside. The next day I went to the park, the same park where, months ago, I'd wandered with fear and doubt in my chest. I sat on a wooden bench and pulled a crumpled flyer from my coat pocket, the old chorus ad, the one I picked up with trembling hands. A lump rose in my throat, because that's where it all started. One small decision, one moment, one terrified yes. And look where I was now. I realized that people don't change all at once. We change slowly, one step at a time, one boundary, one brave little start, a quiet restart without applause. I took out my sketchbook and wrote a single line in the middle of the page. What you see now was always here. It just needed room to bloom. I closed the notebook, closed my eyes, and let the sunlight touch my face. Alone, but complete. That's when I understood what freedom really is. It's not about being far from him. It's about being close to myself, to the woman I was, the one who endured, the one who broke, and the one who rose. Life isn't some perfect fairy tale. There are still hard days, doubt, loneliness. But now I know who I am, and I won't settle for less. I won't shrink myself to fit in any room, because I wasn't made to please. I was made to exist. And for me, existing is the sweetest revenge of all. That's when I realized, sometimes, the loudest scream for freedom is the silence of someone who finally chose herself. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and keep walking this journey with us. And if you'd like to help keep these stories alive, buy me a coffee. The link's pinned in the comments. Oh, and make sure to watch our last video. She said I was worthless. A story about how every humiliation became a sentence, and every tear a voice.